This video is going to focus on Brutus 1, which is an anti-federalist argument against the proposed Constitution. The author of this one is Robert Yates, and again, takes a much more negative view of the proposed Constitution and argues against it. So this is often used as a comparison to Federalist 10, because at least for the second half of what we're going to talk about, it directly goes against what Madison argued in Federalist 10. So there's two key points to understanding Yates's arguments in Brutus 1. And again, this is arguing against the Constitution. So the first argument is that Yates believes the newly proposed Constitution is going to take too much power away from the states, right? And the national government is going to be too powerful. Remember, the Articles of Confederation system gave the states a lot of power, and the national government was weak. And this is going in the opposite direction. So there's three specific things that he concentrates on that sort of gets at the point that states will become like less powerful and the national government will become too powerful. The first two, these boxes here, here and here, are things that are like specific wording of the Constitution that he was concerned about. So Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution, so this is the end of the legislative branch section of the Constitution, basically says, Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. This wording of the Constitution is known as the necessary and proper clause, because the words necessary and proper are actually listed in this. Here's the bottom line with Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lists all the powers of the national government. And the idea behind Article 1, Section 8 is that the national government could only do what was specifically listed in the Constitution within Article 1, Section 8, any of the powers that are listed there, and they couldn't do anything more. And that the other part of that is that if it wasn't something in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, that was given directly to the national government, the states got everything else. So the national government got what was listed, and the states got everything else. So Yates was concerned that this last little bit of wording in Article 1, Section 8 would be used in the future to expand the national government's power because it was so vague. Article 1, Section 8 lists all the powers the national government has, and then it says, oh, by the way, you can also do what's necessary and proper to carry out things on that list. So we just thought that was too vague and that would be exploited, as a loophole by the national government in the future to expand their power. And as we're going to look at this year, he was very correct in assuming that it is going to be used to do more by the national government than what's listed in there. The second part of the Constitution that he's concerned about is Article 6. It reads, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and the treaties made, of which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. This part of the Constitution is known as the Supremacy Clause. And basically what it says is that there's like a hierarchy, and the national government is sort of like on top. And if there's a state law that conflicts with the national government law, because of the wording of this Constitution, or this article in the Constitution, the national government is going to win that fight every day of the week. If there's any two conflicting things between the national government and the states, it's going to be like the national government that automatically wins out that fight. This is what makes the Constitution different from the Articles of Confederation system, is that if the states are all doing their own thing and the national government says you have to do it this way, then you have to do it the way the national government says because of this clause. Yates' concern was that this was just going to automatically give the victory to the national government in every fight or dispute that they have with the states. So he's concerned about the wording there too. And then the last thing he's worried about is that this new Constitution is going to allow the national government to tax. So the question is, how would this hurt the states? And it will hurt the states because there'll be less money for the states to collect from the citizens. The argument being that if the national government's already taxing the citizens and the states still have to tax the citizens, right? Both levels of government want taxes. Then if the national government is taxing, that they're going to be taking money away from the citizens, and there won't be that much left for the states to get. So he just felt like one of his major complaints was that the national government was going to be too powerful as a result of the Constitution being set up. His other argument, and this goes directly against what Madison argues in Federalist 10, is that the Constitution is trying to set up a representative democracy in a large geographical area, and it won't work. So, like, why won't it work? So the first quote from Brutus 1 that relates to this point is, history furnishes no example of a free republic, anything like the extent of the United States. The Grecian republics were of small extent, so also was the Romans. Both of these, it is true, in process of time, extended their conquests over large territories of country. And the consequence was that their governments were changed from that of free governments to those of the most tyrannical that ever existed in the world. So his first argument is that there's really no example of a democracy in a large area that actually worked. In fact, his argument is that history shows that it was smaller areas like Greece and Rome that initially were democracies, and it worked fine. But as they became larger, because they started taking over more areas, the democracy thing didn't work anymore, and they became sort of like tyrannies, like almost like dictatorships. So, Yates is arguing that there's like no example that we can look at in the history of the world and say, oh, well, democracy worked in an area just like the United States. So this is like uncharted territory and probably wasn't going to work. The other thing he argues is the negative of having a large geographical separation between the rulers and citizens is that the rulers will be distant from the citizens. And if the rulers are distant from the citizens, they won't really know what the people want, and they won't know what the people need. And that's the way a representative democracy is supposed to work, right? So won't know what people want because they're too separated. Like you have like the leaders will be in Washington, D.C., and you might have the citizens of Massachusetts. Like we're talking about like the 17 and early 1800s here, where there's no communication, the transportation is very difficult, so that the rulers would be too separated like by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles from the citizens they're representing. And the way that a representative democracy is supposed to work is you're supposed to do what the citizens want you to do. You're representing them. But if you're too separated from them, you won't know. And then what decisions will you make? You'll just make decisions that benefit yourself in your own selfish interests. So his argument is that this is going to end up being a government run by wealthy people for the benefit of wealthy people because they won't actually know what the citizens want.